Welcome back, campers, to part 2 of Mammoth Cave. And of course there would be a part 2. It isn't called Mammoth Cave for nothing. In the previous episode, I shared with you how the cave became what it is today, and that it is thanks to the slaves like Stephen Bishop who dedicated their lives to mapping out the cave systems, guiding tour goers safely through the passages. Even though they may be gone, we still see ghostly glimpses of guides holding up their lanterns, standing on far-off cliffs and landings. We all can agree from reading and learning of the past that our land and resources and people have been exploited for the richer to get richer. Fortunately, there were some folks that saw places such as Mammoth Cave, Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, the Rocky Mountains, and so many more held a beauty that should not be ignored. And the treatment it received by those who didn't see just how fragile this land was were slowly destroying it. This resulted in a sort of conservation movement, and it began to take hold in America. Writers and photographers were showing people across the globe the splendor these places held and also the importance of keeping them. I don't know about you, but the phrase progress for the sake of progress is not something I adhere to. And with the help of writers such as Clarence Dutton, Nathaniel P. Landgard, John Muir, and a number of others, they began to take part in this national park movement. Now, the National Park Service was established in 1916, and it was a rocky start, as oddly enough, those in charge of the National Park Service included the Departments of War, Agriculture, and the Interior. Yeah, the Department of War is really going to spend their time monitoring and preserving land for the sake of land preservation. But then steps in a Stephen Ting Mather. He became the first superintendent of the parks, and he held this title from 1915 to 1929. Fun fact here, camper, if we look at the timeline, yes, it does get a bit wonky. Yellowstone became the first national park in 1872. The National Park Service was not established until 1916, and Stephen Mather, who I just mentioned, became the first superintendent a year earlier in 1915. And like I said, it was a rocky start, but Stephen really got to work. He corrected a lot of the mismanagement of funds. He also established places like the Grand Canyon, Acadia, Bryce, Zion, Lassen, Hawaii, and Mount McKinley, all as natural parks, and even established legislation to help create other parks like Mammoth Cave. So now back to the tours. I had mentioned in my previous episode 23, about the Violet Lantern Tour, which I really want to go see myself. But there are so many other different tours you can take at Mammoth Cave, and this makes it a really great place to check out for those who might have little kids, or maybe you have some sort of disability that can make traversing a little more difficult than other people. So each tour is going to have maybe different requirements in order for travelers, in order to travel through the cave system. There is actually an intro to cave crawling that members can actually sign up for and take. And again, they do have requirements, such as you have to wear boots, hiking boots with at least a 1/4 inch depth, and they have to cover your ankle. So learning how to cave crawl in flip-flops or sandals is going to be a no-go. However, if you are more interested in some of the other popular caves like Frozen Niagara, that one may be your jam. It's also a good one for those who maybe do have disabilities, because some of these walks Some of these tours can take 3 hours. However, the frozen Niagara is fairly level, not 100% level, but it is fairly level, and it also does not have stairs. So for those who might have trouble going up and down steps, this tour might be the best for you. Oh, there is also a Gothic Avenue tour, named because the rock formations actually resemble Gothic architecture. Sounds pretty cool. However, this one is a bit longer. This one takes about 2 hours, a little bit longer than Frozen Niagara, and it is about 1.7 miles long. So depending on when you go, and that's the other thing, the weather is going to play a part. So like I said, depending on where you go, check the website to see, when is the best time to make your plans. And also double check the age restrictions. There are some tours that, children are not able to go and go through the tours. So always check that out also if you've got kids. Ooh, one more cool fact here, camper. In some parts of the cave system, actually a few parts, fossilized shark teeth have been found, including shark bones, including a spine. So this is proof that many, many moons ago, Kentucky was at one point underwater. About 14 million years ago, but still, oh my God. So current research is now being done. They have found, the researchers have actually found a partial skull, and one of the teeth they have determined to belong to a great white shark. Now this tooth was 1 inch wide, and they estimate that the shark had a body length of 15 to 16 feet long. Science, man. It's so cool. Get out there and learn. Okay, so back to the spooky part. The last episode ended with Floyd Collins and sadly his tragic death in Sandy Cave. Campers, I gotta tell you, still to this day, folks believe they can hear his calls for help. And he is not the only person to have gone missing in and around Mammoth Cave. So, strange occurrences, odd deaths, even odder disappearances have occurred here and there around and inside Mammoth Cave. Take, for example, in 2019, the body of 23-year-old Mariah Amber DeCrue was found dead in the Zion Hill Cemetery. The police believed it was suspicious and performed an investigation. However, the final cause was determined to be acute diphenhydramine intoxication. So they believe that she took too much allergy medicine. Now, Amber was young, she was engaged to be married, and she even had a young daughter. She had so much going for her. So many plans were in the mix, and in all accounts, she was looking forward to her future. So why was she found alone on a Sunday at night in a cemetery and overdosed on cold medicine? I don't know about you, camper, but when I'm sick, I prefer to take my medicine at home. I don't venture out to the cemetery to pop some Allegra. Now, this is not to stir the peace of the dead, but there are some underground theories that there might have been an active murderer during that time in Kentucky. A Reddit post by Don't Be Cry Baby reported a number of suspicious deaths in and around the Kentucky area, that Mammoth Cave was not so much the center of it, but it just about covered a lot of Mammoth Cave. These areas included places like Louisville, Burlington, Henderson, Beaver Dam, and a number of others. And I can't also help but be suspicious as to, again, why a young mother was out at night and no one was aware. No one had any clue where she was. On April 12th, 1996, Orla Aileen J. Barrick was last seen by a neighbor walking her Pomeranian on Laurel Ridge Road. Orla was, in all accounts, a very independent retiree woman, and she lived by herself close to the Nolan River, which is just a stone's throw away from Mammoth Cave. However, 3 days later, her neighbor felt something was amiss because Orla was a creature of habit, and she would always take her little doggo, Fifi, for an evening stroll. And when the neighbor hadn't seen her for 3 days, they reported her missing. Police arrived at the home and found that it was locked up, so they had to force their way into Orla's home. And what they found, at first, when they went through the house, at first the police were concerned. The more they went through the house, their concern turned to worry and then ultimately to suspicion. So the first thing they noticed was that the carpet had a stain on it, which was determined to be blood. And, blood doesn't necessarily mean somebody died. Plus, you didn't really know if it was Orla's blood, So there was that. And then they noticed her sofa was out of place. It was, moved in such a way as to be off kilter. So that was a little concerning. Then they found her dentures. Her dentures were soaking, and they found a burned cigarette that had been sitting on a shelf. So these things are starting to get a little worrisome. What really got the hair on the back of the neck raised was that they found her dog locked in its crate. So that dog had been locked there for 3 days. The denture soaking, the burned cigarette, the dog locked up, all pointed to the fact that Orla was not planning on venturing out, nor was she expecting any visitors. They did a search, and the only thing they found that were missing was her purse and a fitted sheet. She did have a hidden stash of $400 that she kept in the freezer. The police searched it, and that money was still there. So they decided that it was not a robbery gone wrong sort of situation. And because the police had to break in, they knew that there was no forced entry. Somebody came in, without any problems. And they locked up when they left. So part of Orla's nightly routine included walking Fifi, and then she would take the garbage out. She did this every night. It was confirmed by friends and family. She never let her garbage sit inside overnight. When police went to the kitchen, they found a bag of garbage sitting on her counter. Clearly, someone had interrupted Orla's nightly ritual, but who? Why? Attempts to find out proved futile. There was nothing. No hair, no signs, no nothing. No footprints in the dirt, nothing. So nearly a year goes by. It is February 7th, 1997. Some clumps of hair were found at Mammoth Cave in the Green River. And these clumps of hair was so noticeable that they were actually discovered by some local fishermen. Odd, right? These clumps of hair were later discovered to belong to Orla. And since that time, 1997, no other evidence of Orla has been discovered. Ronald Baldwin lived in Bonneville, Kentucky, which is about 30 minutes from Mammoth Cave. June 12th, 2004, he had been out four-wheeling with a neighbor kid. Now, this wasn't unusual. The neighbors and Ron were friendly. Ronald owned like 300 acres. And to be honest, if I could have access to all that land, I would be wanting to run around playing and four-wheeling too. So Ronald was known also for when he would get out on his four-wheel, he'd be gone for hours at a time. It's what he loved to do. And again, to me, that would totally make sense. Now, the neighboring kid was 12 years old. And this wasn't his first time hanging out and, being over there, four-wheeling with Ronald. Now, they did report that the child did have some sort of mental handicap, but no one really knows to what extent. And they sort of use this as one reason or another, but I'll get to that. So Ronald and the 12-year-old were out four-wheeling, and the 12-year-old ended up having to return back to Ronald's home to gas up the four-wheeler. And when the 12-year-old went back to meet Ronald was gone. He wasn't there. Wasn't where they expected him to, wasn't where he expected him to be. So the 12-year-old goes back to Ronald's home, tells his girlfriend, hey, I was out four-wheeling with Ron, and he said to meet him here. I went back. He's not there. So the girlfriend kind of chalked it up to either because this 12-year-old had, quote unquote, a mental handicap, maybe he just forgot where, or maybe he misunderstood or something like that. And she was like, don't worry, Ron will show up. This is kind of what he does. He goes out, he goes four-wheeling, loses track of time, whatever. Sadly, Ronald did not return home that night. And his girlfriend ended up reporting to the police the next evening, about 9:30, that Ronald was missing. Ronald had not come home. For 3 days, the police searched those 300 acres. Found nothing. Couldn't find a single thing. Now, his neighbor, Ronald's neighbor, found Ron's ATV. It had been abandoned, along with Ronald's prescription glasses, his shoes, and an unfinished bottle of early times whiskey. No rhyme or reason could be deduced as to why Ronald would leave his prescription sunglasses, leave his ATV, and take his shoes off. And honestly, Ronald was not a small dude. He was like a big, burly country guy. So you would have noticed somebody walking, like him, walking barefoot down a road or in the woods. And with his shoes off, he'd be stepping on rocks, pine cones, sharp sticks. And then without his prescription without his glasses, prescription glasses, he would have no idea where he was going. Not to mention, why was there a bottle of whiskey around when he was driving an ATV with a neighbor's child? And I'm not saying he was inebriated, but we just don't know. It just makes no sense to leave those things there and to just walk away from his ATV. Also knowing that the neighbor kid was gonna be meeting back up with him. Sadly, no leads have panned out, no updates have been received. He has disappeared completely. Now, Tony Choate, whose full name is Anthony Ray Choate, I think I'm pronouncing his last name right. If not, I apologize. You can go ahead and leave a comment and let me know if, any mispronunciations, let me know. I'd like to know. Anyways, Tony was a 25-year-old four-wheeling fan too. And also a native of Bonneville, just like Ronald. So Tony was out four-wheeling about noontime, September 14th, 1993. Now, Tony was leaving his father-in-law's home and was supposed to meet his child at the bus stop before Tony planned to head out for the day. Sadly, Tony never met up with his child. And he was actually never heard from again. Just like Ronald, Tony was an avid four-wheeler and was also known for long four-wheeling excursions as well. Now, even though he didn't meet up with his child as planned, it was not seen as an immediate cause for concern. Tony was young, being 25, and he was known for, again, having these long four-wheeling excursions. Sometimes he would even be gone for days. So it was a little disappointing, but it didn't concern his grandparents. Tony had been raised by his grandparents. However, 3 days had gone by, and his grandparents began to really start worrying. So they phoned the police, reported him missing. And unfortunately, the police knew about his habit of being gone on the four-wheel, so the police, they really did not think it was anything to worry about either, so they didn't put a whole lot of effort into his disappearance. They just thought, it's Tony again, going off on his four-wheel. Unfortunately, once they did start looking into Tony disappearing, they quickly believed Tony didn't just disappear. They believed Tony was murdered. And their speculation is that Tony may have actually been committing a little crime of his own and was potentially caught in the act. Now, Tony wasn't really a bad kid, okay? He just, he had a history of some substance abuse and he got into a little bit of trouble. But it wasn't anything life-threatening or dangerous. However, the circumstances that the police discovered, the evidence that the police discovered, it is the police belief that Tony has passed. Tony was murdered, and they believe it was because he was doing something potentially illegal. Again, the speculation, because Tony has not been found. And unfortunately, his grandparents have passed, and sadly they passed never knowing what happened to Tony either. Now, his disappearance occurred about 20 minutes from Mammoth Cave. So Ronald was, so Mammoth Cave is huge. We kind of covered that. So it's possible, that Mammoth Cave has nothing to do with it, but a lot of people have used Mammoth Cave and the cave system for hideouts, for doing some things that they shouldn't be doing. Now that there's more, there's more tour guides, there's more people that work for Mammoth Cave, work for the national parks. They do cover Mammoth Cave. They are, they're regularly looking around it, but Mammoth Cave is huge, so anything can happen. That being said, a huge guy like Ronald would see, he wouldn't go unnoticed. If you happen to see some huge guy wandering around Mammoth Cave, and if there was any suspicious looking people with Tony, you'd think that would be noticed. Of course, again, Mammoth Cave is huge. Maybe they just weren't seen. And Orla, we don't know what happened to her. Who knocked on her door? What did they want? What was the purpose? And Mariah, why would she go to a cemetery? Why would she be in a cemetery? You can speculate maybe she went there to see a past relative, but that was never mentioned in the police report. Nobody ever confirmed that she had gone there to see or to pay respects maybe to a deceased relative or a deceased friend. She wasn't expected to be there at all. And as for the theory of the murderer operating in that area, now some reports the killer was given the name the red-headed killer. However, we have learned that other women, these were not redheads, but they were still women murdered in and around the same area, around the same time. And currently the likelihood that two killers were operating at the same time in the same vicinity, it's always been looked at as that sort of scenario is a far stretch. It's a far stretch. It's a big leap. But it's not saying it's not possible. Mammoth Cave. It is beautiful. Even just looking at the pictures, it's a beautiful place. It has a history that even goes beyond when man was first there. Thousands of people flock to see it. They come to see the underground caves, the natural, formation of the caves. It's just a beauty. It's something beautiful to see. And if you've been to Mammoth Cave, you have a story to tell, please feel free to send it to me. I would love to hear your experience. You can send your email to me at campfireghoststories8@gmail.com. That is campfireghoststories, the number 8@gmail.com. And in case you may not have heard, I will be starting my interviews of solo women campers and hikers come 2025. These are going to be dubbed my Campfire Quickies. And these are all going to be about women from all walks of life who want to share their stories to help encourage any other women who are wanting to venture out into the green as well, whether it's camping or hiking. So you can head over to my YouTube channel, Campfire Ghost Stories. Hit that like and subscribe button so you can be kept up to date on all the cool interviews. I don't have an estimated release date yet. Trying to figure out how to be as proactive and on top of things as I can. But the videos are going to be a new thing for me. But so yeah, head over, hit the like and subscribe button so when those get out, you will be notified. And if you would like to help keep the campfires going, you can head on over to Buy Me a Coffee at Campfire Ghost Stories. As always, get out to the green as much as you can, ground yourself, take care of yourself, and I will see you at the next campfire. Happy camping.